Someone asked me why I never told a joke. And number one is because I'm not good at it. And secondly, unless it illustrates a point, then I would fall flat. But I did hear one that illustrates maybe a point that could be of value to us, about a man who came from London over to Ottawa. He visited your capital here, and then on his way to visit the capital of the United States of America, he stopped in New York City. And he really had a ball. When he got down into Washington, D.C., he was out on the dance floor one evening, and a man walked up to him and he said, let me ask you something. He said, were you ever in New York? He said, well, now, let me see. He said, places. Says, yes, I was in New York City. He said, well, did you by any chance go down to the Jack Dempsey Club when you were in New York City? He said, well, now, let me see. He says, entertainment. Says, yes, I did go to the Jack Dempsey Club. Says, well, did you meet a Mrs. Holzapfel when you were at the Jack Dempsey Club? He said, well, now, let me see. He says, people. Says, yes, I met a Mrs. Holzapfel. He said, well, after you left the Jack Dempsey Club, did you take her up to your hotel room? He said, well, now, let me see. He says, hobbies. Said, yes, I did. I took her up to my room. He says, well, I'll thank you to know I'm Mr. Holzapfel, and I don't like it. He says, opinions. Says, I didn't like it either. Thank God that in Alcoholics Anonymous we can have our own opinions. And opinions can get us into a lot of trouble. But I believe when I think of step number 11, which is my favorite step of all the steps, here we find a relationship that you alone can exercise. No one can do it for you, and it's important. I had dinner at the table with Mark from Ottawa last evening, and we were talking some about opinions and things we heard that could be of value to us. And here's where we exchange ideas. And I wish I could say I have an idea I can give you that will absolutely work, that is original, that I thought of it, no one else. But I can't. I have yet to find something original. I've only taken what I have received from others and applied it to my own way of living or accepting any program, whether it be business, Alcoholics Anonymous, church, whatever. And Mark gave me this, and I think it fits right in as an introduction to step number 11. And here's what it says. I can do the possible by faith. God can do the impossible. I cannot do what God can do. God will not do what I can do. But what can I do? And that's the $64,000 question. I can do the possible by faith. And how true it is. So with that thought in mind, let's go now to step number 11. Now I want to go back to the contents, because I like to use contents to guide me in the right direction. It's a kind of a blueprint. And on page 8 of my contents, find step 11 in your book, and let's look at it together. Sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him, praying only for knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. Now, I don't know what you have done in your book, but I have changed mine to read seek instead of sought, not a past tense, because I did that this morning. And I'm sure many of you did. So I seek through prayer and meditation to improve not our, but my conscious contact with God as I understand Him, praying only for knowledge of His will for me and the power to carry that out. And in prayers today, in my prayer this morning, I said, show me, Heavenly Father, give me the knowledge of what your will is for my life, and I have the faith and the conviction that you will supply the power needed for me to carry it out. And He has done that since July the 16th, 1971. So I know that it works. Now, meditation and prayer under this says, main channels to the higher power. Connection between self-examination and meditation and prayer. An unshakable foundation for life. How shall we meditate? Meditation has no boundaries. An individual adventure. First result is emotional balance. What about prayer? Daily petition for understanding of God's will and grace to carry it out. Actual results of prayer are beyond question. Rewards of meditation and prayer. And using this outline, you could on a daily basis find God's will for you in His vineyard here on earth. In July of 1971, I attended my first state convention in Raleigh, North Carolina. In Durham, North Carolina, near our capital of the state of North Carolina. I didn't really want to go, but Willard Peggs, it was mentioned from this podium a few minutes ago, wanted me to be there, and I went. And I was there for my first convention, and I haven't missed one since. A man who was speaking at that time was by the name of Jack Brennan. Many of you may have heard him or heard his tapes. I liked his name because I had the name Jack, and I felt maybe if I'd talk with him, I might find some answers. So I visited with Jack after his talk, and I said, Jack, I just don't seem to be able to get a handle on it. I don't believe I'll ever be able to stop drinking, because when I'd feel pretty good, I'd take me a Budweiser, and off to the races I would go again. And Jack says, well, you can't on your own. But says, I found someone that can help you. And he gave me a little pink card. And he says, keep this and use it every time you need it. And I have that in my valuable papers back home. But I never wanted to lose it because it has helped me, and I use it every day of my life in my meditation. And here's what Jack gave me. It says, I met God this morning when my day was at its best. His presence came like sunrise, like a glory in my breast. All day long His presence lingered. All day long God stayed with me. And we sailed in perfect calmness over a very troubled sea. So you see, I've learned the secret. Learned from many a troubled way. You must seek God in the morning to have Him through the day. And that's true. And I found Him this morning. And I believe you did, or you wouldn't be present right now to talk about this 11th step. The big book in chapter number 6, Into Action, and I'm not going to refer to that because it's already been discussed. But I put it in my page at the top right here, so in my studies and in my meditations, if I need to, I can go exactly from one book to the other. So I put chapter 6 Into Action, big book, pages 85 through 88, covers step number 11. And then I put something else on my book, and I hope you'll put it on yours. Is that I should go back and read page 46 in the big book and read page 68 in the big book. Because this shows me that this 11th step was used long before the In Action chapter was even written. And on page 77 in your big book, you will find the real purpose for our being here, for the whole AA program. What is our purpose in life? I don't know what you think your place is in this vineyard of Alcoholics Anonymous, but I have a lot of convictions about what God's will is for my life. I believe that He saved me for a purpose. And this is just a little part of it right here this morning. I believe He saved me to carry a message. Yes, Wesley and Willard wanted what we're having this day. It was in their hearts and minds. And I'm going to say this now. This month, this past month, I reached my 70th birthday. My time is limited for me to do what God's will is in my life. And a part of His will for me is that I challenge you, especially you younger people, to really get into the textbooks of Alcoholics Anonymous so you can influence others and carry the message. Our time is limited. By longevity and by actuarial tables, and I've been in the insurance business for 45 years, I know that actuarially speaking, I should go first off of this committee. So if I can leave a challenge for you to take over these reins. Now, Willard Pegg, that was mentioned from here, I went and stood by his bedside when he was going in for a bypass. There was a black man came in there orderly getting him ready to go for surgery. He just reeked of alcoholism. And you know what Willard said to him? He said, "Big boy, have you ever heard of the program of Alcoholics Anonymous?" Willard never regained consciousness after that, but he told me this before he went in for surgery. He said, "Jack, keep carrying the message." He pushed me. If it had not been for him, I'd have never stood for delegate for our state or served as chairman of our state. His influence enabled me to do what God's will was for my life. And so I hope what I can say may influence you. Willard never recovered, but he left his influence. And I know now that the only thing you and I will hold in our cold, dead hands will be that which we have given away. So it's important that we find what God's will is in our lives. And then Wesley told me the same thing. He'd come up there and we'd sit in Willard's front room and go over these books and talk about the big book and what all Joe and Charlie had already been doing, and how if we would put teams together and influence others, we could carry the message. And it's come to Canada. And I want to commend you for a job well done here. But now let's look at our 12 and 12 to see if we can find some reasons why we should know that without prayer, I think I'm just like a tree without roots. Prayer is the way I can find contact with the God of my understanding. First paragraph. Prayer and meditation are our principal means of conscious contact with God. And isn't it good that we don't have to have a priest or anyone intervene for us? That it's one-on-one, that any of us can talk with God. We don't have to have fancy language. We don't even have to have the English language, just as long as we can communicate with Him. Come down to the last paragraph. On step 11. To certain newcomers and to those one-time agnostics who still cling to the AA program as their higher power, claims for the power of prayer may, despite all the logic and experience and proof of it, still be unconvincing or quite objectionable. Those of us who once felt this way can certainly understand and sympathize. Now, I want to stop here and say that I have never argued with an agnostic or an atheist. All I do is pray for them. They have a right to their opinion, and I will exercise their right to anything they have to say. And I believe, and I will always believe, that action speaks louder than words. So our influence can ultimately bring this about. We will remember how something deep inside us kept rebelling against the idea of knowing, of bowing before any God. Many of us had strong logic, too, which proved there was no God whatever. What about all the accidents, sickness, cruelty, and injustice in the world? What about all those unhappy lives which were the direct result of unfortunate birth and uncontrollable circumstances? Surely there could be no justice in this scheme of things, and therefore no God at all. And I will have to say that there was a time during my drunken rages, and when I was in the throes of alcoholism, that I got to wondering about these things myself and drifted away from the God of my understanding. So it's only natural that the carnal part of man will make us rebel against the spiritual. Sometimes we took a slightly different tack. Sure, we said to ourselves, the hen probably did come before the egg. No doubt the universe had a first cause of some sort. The God of the atom, maybe, hot and cold by turns. But certainly there wasn't any evidence of a God who knew or cared about human beings. We liked AA all right, and were quick to say that it had done miracles. And I've shared with you already that for 3 years I saw the miracles in here without turning back to a God of my understanding. I stayed with you as a group because you had something. So that proves conclusively that influence can work even when we have not found our conscious contact with God. But we recoil from meditation and prayer as obstinately as a scientist would refuse to perform a certain experiment lest it prove his pet theory wrong. Of course, we finally did experiment, and when unexpected results followed, we felt different. In fact, we knew different, and so we were sold on meditation and prayer. And that we have found can happen to anybody who tries. It has been well said that almost the only scoffers at prayer are those who never tried it enough. And how true that is. Those of us who have come to make regular use of prayer would no more do without it than we would refuse air, food, or sunshine. And for the same reason. When we refuse air, light, or food, the body suffers. And when we turn away from meditation and prayer, we likewise deprive our minds, emotions, and our intuitions of vitally needed support. As a body can fail its purpose for lack of nourishment, so can the soul. We all need the light of God's reality, the nourishment of His strength, and the atmosphere of His grace. To an amazing extent, the facts of AA life confirm to this ageless truth. And if we didn't read anything else in the 12 and 12 but this, it would give us a message that is so vitally needed in the world today, and especially by the suffering alcoholic. Oh, Paul said, I can do all things through Christ who strengtheneth me. Now, he had a higher power of his choice. I can rephrase that and say, I can do all things through my higher power who strengtheneth me. And that's true. God and I are indeed a majority. Now, over on page 102, and I'm not going into this because you've all heard it, but St. Francis' prayer is indeed a great one. And if you hadn't read it lately, restudy step 11 and see this printed on page 101 where he talks about making him a channel. And let's move on over then to 102. It may be 101 in your book. And look, 99? Okay, look at page 99. As beginners in meditation is where I'd like for us to start. Have you found that in your books? As beginners in meditation, we might now reread this prayer several times very slowly, savoring every word and trying to take in the deep meaning of each phrase and idea. It will help if we can drop all resistance to what our friend says. For in meditation, debate has no place. We rest quietly with the thoughts of someone who knows, so that we may experience and learn. And if any of you have read some of the biography about Wesley and his activities and things, not a part of Alcoholics Anonymous, but as a memorial to AA up in Akron, he had a habit of saying, I know that I know that I know that I know. And that's why I say let's listen to those people who know that they know. And that's where we can get avenues of meditation. And one book that I recommend, which is one of our textbooks, is As Bill Sees It. That little book, I can find most anything that suits a subject I need to talk over with my Creator. You can find some good means of meditation through that little book. As though lying upon a sunlit beach, let us relax and breathe deeply of the spiritual atmosphere with which the grace of this prayer surrounds us. Let us become willing to partake and be strengthened and lifted up by the sheer spiritual power. Beauty and love of which these magnificent words are the carriers. Let us look now upon the sea and ponder what its mystery is. and let us shift our eyes to the far horizon, beyond which we shall seek all those wonders still unseen. This is to encourage us to meditate. And I want to find some time so that you can tell us how you meditate. I've mentioned that as Bill Caesar can help me meditate. I can use a big book to meditate. There are a lot of good books, but in the final analysis, what it really means is one-on-one with God. And when I walked out here early this morning and looked at that river, and I found out it's the only river here that travels north. The rest of them in Canada travel south. So I learned something about Canada I didn't know. And I didn't know which way this river was flowing. But this is a beautiful place, and when you look at the leaves changing, can you question that they're in the supreme architect of the universe? Can't you meditate and hear him saying things to you? It's easy for me to meditate. And a lot of times I do this morning as an example, before I got up. I can pause and thank God. I don't have to be sitting up reading. I can just think of all the blessings He sent my way and be able to meditate. Turn with me now over, if that's 99 on your book, this would probably be maybe 98. Anyway, I want you to say, now what of prayer? Find the paragraph. It's about middle ways in my book on page 104. Now what of prayer? 102? Okay. Now what of prayer? What is really prayer? What is the most powerful prayer ever been uttered? I read in a book that it said, one man says, "Thank you, Lord, that I'm not like one of these Pharisees." And then I heard another prayer that said, "Lord, have mercy upon me, a sinner." Which was the more powerful? Which was the more powerful? What kind of a prayer? There's a lot of different kinds of prayer, and I think Joe has mentioned it, how we can ask, "Gimme, gimme, gimme." Is that prayer should be of thanksgiving. I thank God today that I have sobriety. I have one more day of beginning a life of sobriety. Now what of prayer? Prayer is a raising of the heart and mind to God. And in this sense, it includes meditation. How may we go about it, and how does it fit in with meditation? Prayer, as commonly understood, is a petition to God. Having opened our channel as best we can, we try to ask for those right things of which we and others are in the greatest need. And we think that the whole range of our needs is well defined by that part of step 11 which says, knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. A request for this fits in any part of our day. And how true it is. God has a mission for me that no one can do but me. God has a mission for each of you that no one can fill that place. He had a purpose. He saved us for a purpose. And we can talk to Him in an unselfish way. And it isn't one without faith either. I believe. I know that my wife is here today as a result of prayer. You know, with just a few days of sobriety, there's a little car pulled out in front of me. I put on my brakes. My wife had on her seat belt. It ruptured her inside. They packed her in ice to operate, and they told me she wouldn't make it. But you know, some AAs and Al-Anons met there in the little chapel in the hospital. She's here today. That's evidence of the answer to prayer. God will save us for a purpose. He does answer prayer. I know it. I see that evidence daily. I have a secretary that died and was buried last week. She had tuberculosis. She had a cancer of the lung 1 year ago. She had it removed. She came back to work. She went back and she died. I had prayer with her regularly in the room with she and her husband. I never did pray that God would heal her cancer or that He would raise her up to come back to work, because I have learned that there's not a more unselfish prayer that has ever been written or uttered than the prayer in step number 11. I prayed that God would give to this secretary and to me and to her husband knowledge of God's will in her life, knowing full well that He would give us the power to carry that out in however form it should be. And she died, and her husband accepted it. And he remembered this type of prayer. That is an unselfish prayer. And you know what? This lady was a great influence, and that influence will live right on and on, even though she's going to claim her reward. So this is an unselfish prayer. If we pray unselfishly, that God will give us a knowledge. Now, I've heard that knowledge is power. You ever heard that statement? Is it? Not really. Only applied knowledge is power. If we have the knowledge of every textbook we have in Alcoholics Anonymous and do not share it with others, it's the same as having no knowledge at all. So that's why I say that God has, His will for me is to carry this message. His will for you, you decide. But I believe that He saved us all for the same purpose if we're alcoholics. We have a retreat, and I promised Ruth that I'd send her some flyers on it. They'll be meeting next week while we're in Sacramento. And I'll miss the first one for 15 years. But in that retreat, we have experiences that we share with one another. And it's up in the Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina at a place called Ridgecrest. And that's where the Baptists have their big get-together. And so do the Presbyterians there at Montreat. And they told about this Baptist minister that was always talking to his deacons and his congregation about gimme, gimme, gimme. Give me money, give me prayer, give me this. And he said to these deacons, he said, we need more prayer in our church. We need to pray diligently. Then we'll have all the money we need. We can expand. We can build a new sanctuary. And the deacons got kind of tired of this, and they said, preacher, let me ask you a question. If a big bear would come out of these mountains here, and there are a lot of them in those mountains in North Carolina, what would you do? He said, I'd drop on my knees and pray. He says, well, then you better start praying, because here come one. The deacons ran off and left the minister. In a few minutes, he caught up with the deacon. And the deacon said, well, preacher, what in the world happened? He says, I don't rightly know, but I have reached a conclusion. Praying is good at the sick bed. It's good in the hospital. It's good in a prayer meeting, but it ain't worth a damn in a bear meeting. This illustrates the fact that we need to do our part, and that God intends that we work as a partnership. So prayer should be unselfish, and anyone can talk with God. Go with me to the next page over, and let's look at that last paragraph where it says, of course it is reasonable and understandable. Have you found that? Of course, and I've underlined this, of course it is reasonable and understandable that the question is often asked, why can't we take a specific and troubling dilemma straight to God, and in prayer secure from Him sure and definite answers to our requests? Now, I've written down here in my book, Jack, you better be careful what you pray for, because you might get it. And that's true. Sometimes we aren't ready for the things we pray for. This can be done, but it has hazards, and here Bill outlines it. We have seen AAs ask with much earnestness and faith for God's explicit guidance on matters ranging all the way from a shattering domestic or financial crisis to correcting a minor personal fault like tardiness. Quite often, however, the thoughts that seems to come from God are not answers at all. They prove to be well-intentioned, unconscious rationalizations. The AA, or indeed any man or woman, I would add, who tries to run his or her life rigidly by this kind of prayer, by this self-serving demand of God for replies, is a particularly disconcerting individual. To any questioning or criticism of his action, he instantly prefers his reliance upon prayer for guidance in all matters, great or small. He may have forgotten the possibility that his own wistful thinking and the human tendency to rationalize has distorted his so-called guidance. With the best of intentions, he tends to force his own will into all sorts of situations and problems, with the comfortable assurance that he is acting under God's specific direction. Under such an illusion, he can, of course, create great havoc without any in the least intending it. What is he doing here and trying to tell us to see? That prayer is a simple matter of communicating with God, that if we will pray and if we will listen, and if we will take our textbook, that in some way God will let us know exactly what His intentions are for us. Now turn with me to the last page in step 11, because I want you to share with us how you have found means of meditating and communicating with the God of your understanding. I want us to look at the last paragraph in step 11. Perhaps one of the greatest rewards of meditation and prayer is a sense of belonging that comes to us. We no longer live in a completely hostile world. We are no longer lost and frightened and purposeless. The moment we catch even a glimpse of God's will, the moment we begin to see truth, justice, and love as the real and eternal things of life, we are no longer deeply disturbed by all the seeming evidence of the contrary that surrounds us in purely human affairs. We know that God lovingly watches over us. We know that when we turn to Him, all will be well with us here and hereafter. If we think we have arrived, I believe we're slipping back. And I have a conviction that I am a little bit better today than I was yesterday, or I'm not quite as good. And I want to give you an analogy that I have used in a lot of classes. I have a grandson whose life, I believe, was turned around and saved as a result of his grandfather being an alcoholic. Because when his daddy and mother pushed him aside, couldn't find how to deal with him, I sat down by his bed in the hospital and told him my story and what alcohol had done for me. He is now an ordained Baptist minister and is in the seminary at Wake Forest today, studying to be a minister. When he was just a tiny boy, he liked to sleep with me. He's always called me Papa, and he's always loved me, and he's my namesake, and I am really proud of him. But one night he fell out of the bed, and I jumped up and got him. I said, "Darling, what in the world happened?" He said, "Well, Papa, I guess I just went to sleep too close to the edge of the bed." And you know what a lot of suffering alcoholics go to sleep just a little too close to the bed, the edge of the bed, and fall off, because they don't continue to study to show themselves approved. An alcoholic who needeth not to be ashamed, rightly dividing the truth about the disease of alcoholism. And then there's another analogy of these three horsemen. They were riding through the night, and they heard a voice say out of the darkness, "Stop and dismount. Reach down into the stream you're crossing and pick up all the pebbles you want and put them in your pockets. Then rise on and do not turn back or dismount until the sun rises in the east." And they did as they were told because they were afraid. When the sun came up in the east and they stopped to rest their horses, they dismounted and reached into their pockets, and when they pulled out the pebbles, instead of it being stones or rocks, it was precious stones of rubies and diamonds and emeralds. And they were both glad and sorry. They were glad they picked up as many as they did, and sorry they didn't pick up more. And I'm hoping that today, when this is over, you will hope you picked up just a little more. But whatever you've had, is you'll take it and share it with others. Now, that's all I'm going to say to you. But we have about 18 minutes by my time for some of you to tell us how you use meditation and prayer in carrying the message of Alcoholics Anonymous. Who's first? Okay.
Hi, my name is Gloria, and I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Gloria.
I don't have something to share as much as I have a question that's been perplexing me a little bit. and perhaps it's obviously due to my lack of understanding. It seemed yesterday when we were going through the Big Book on the subject of Step 11 in meditation, that we were instructed that when we were troubled by something that we should stop and try to ask for what God's will for us was in that particular instance, and that then to leave it alone, and that the answer would come to us at some point. And yet today in the 12 and 12 it seems to say that if we ask for directions in a lot of things, that's not correct, that we shouldn't be running our life always asking for directions from God. Now, I'm wondering perhaps that we should only be asking for directions in the large matters that are troubling us and not in the trifling matters. Is that the difference?
Who would like to answer that? You want my opinion of how we should ask?
I guess I didn't understand what the difference was between the two, between what the Big Book seemed to say and what I seemed to hear this morning.
Well, the Big Book was written before the 12 and 12. And then with experience and many of the problems it was written in, is Joe in here? Wasn't he the one that talked about that? Is Joe in the room? No, well, that's all right. The Big Book was written about 15 years before this came out. Time, patience, and perseverance, they say, will accomplish all things. As I see it in this book, God intends for us to do our part. So I can ask God, and if I pray this prayer of His will for me and the power to carry that out, then I believe He'll give me the power. But I don't think we should ask God to do anything that we can do ourselves with His help. And maybe I'm not making it, if I'm not making it clear, maybe I didn't understand it as well as I should. I don't hear good out of this ear. So am I saying anything akin to what you want to hear?
Yeah, I think perhaps you've in part answered my question.
If I haven't, I want to try. I would like for somebody to answer. I believe there's an answer somewhere. But I have learned this. If people ask me a question, I don't know the answer, I say, I don't know. So I'll tell you, I'll find out, and then we'll get back together, and we'll both know. But I do know of what prayer means in my life. I do know that prayer is answered. And I have the conviction that if I do what my knowledge tells me of what God's will is in my life, I'll be able to accept His answer to my prayer, even if it's a emphatic no, no, no. I have learned to accept those things. But I believe He answers prayers for the way it is best for our lives and the way we may influence others. That's my feeling. Anyone else? Is that all right?
Thank you. Yes, you've helped me.
Okay. Anyone else? Yeah. Okay. Hi, Gloria.
I'd like to share something that happened a little while ago. I have a really terrible temper, and I was told that when I start feeling that way, that I should just get up and go and try to sort it out before I blow up, because I have a young son, and I'm very afraid of hurting him with my temper, and how my drinking affected me was just I didn't grow out of the temper. It just got worse. And one day I was in a really bad mood, and he started crying, and I just started, just getting really angry. So I went for a walk, and I just started walking and walking and walking, and all these thoughts started coming into my head, and I couldn't believe it. Like, it was such a feeling of serenity that started to come to me just from walking and thinking and these thoughts. And for a long time I sort of took it as the thoughts that they were my thoughts. And then I heard at a meeting somebody said, stop taking the credit for God's works. And that is so true. It's the thoughts were, I've only been in the program a year and a half, and at the time I think I was under a year. and I'm not. The thoughts were too, they were God's thoughts. They were, they were God's words, right? And I just find with prayer and meditation, I get a real feeling of serenity. And when I went to bed at night, I used to hate to think, and I hated that when I couldn't fall asleep, I'd have to think so much, and think about things I didn't want to think about. And now I use the time for meditation. I use the time to listen to God and and what He has planned for me, and for Him to help me plan for myself. And that's all I'd like to share.
Thank you very much.
Hi, everyone. I'm an alcoholic, and my name was Sue.
Hi, Sue.
A few weeks ago, I was having a rather confused, nervous day, and I think I was being rather self-centered rather than God-centered. And for some reason, I wanted an answer for my whole future. So I said a little prayer. I said, "Dear God, I think I'm a little dumber than the rest of people in the program, but sometimes I really don't know what your will is for me. And I really wish you would tell me and help me out." So I had a vision that if I just was quiet and restful, He'd flash this big picture about my whole future for me. So I just went about my work and was quiet. And about 2 to 3 minutes later, the phone rang, and it was the answering service, and somebody needed help. That was the answer.
Very good.
I don't know if it'll help anybody or not, but I'm going to get it out anyway. I had a bout with this part in the 11th step about why can't you take a specific problem to God. Well, I feel now, as in whatever capacity I had, that I, down through the years, that I had shared 12 steps with you people, but when it came to myself, it was quite a different story, I assure you. Anyhow, I fully believe that I was on some kind of track, whatever it was, and I had this higher power. Now, up to this point in time, I'm definitely convinced that I have a God that I understand. Now, when I came to the part that said, well, what it is there, why can't you take a specific and troubling dilemma straight to God? Bingo. I said, well, hey, this is what I was doing. Isn't that the name of the game? Now, I did get answers. But I figured, well, if it was rationalizations on my part, and of course at the time I had no way of coming down from steps 1 through what have you, I said, well, if I was getting these thoughts in my mind and doing things, and I felt okay about it, there's a lot of eyes in here. If the higher power that I know and understand was not doing this, what the hell was? So I came back and I said to myself, well, I don't think I'm a disconcerting individual, and I kind of related that to somebody who was more religious forward than it was that, like you can be pushy about God and stuff like that, such as they were talking about before. But I did get the idea that I had some kind of a conscious contact, and what was pointed out to me here yesterday, at least the way I took it, was I'm like this kid that's making out the Santa Claus list. And please, if I forgot anything, I want that too. Now, he didn't give me anything, but I'd very much like to try to be like the story where they put a kid in one room with all the toys, and he said, yuck, and put a kid, I want to be the kid in the room with the horsemen who were looking through it and saying, Jesus, there's got to be a pony in here somewhere. Thank you very much.
Hi.
When I first came into this program, I was really sick, not that I'm much better, but they told me that to pray, and I wasn't sure, and I did as I was told. And one evening, my son was arrested for drugs and alcohol, and I went to the police station, and I was really scared. And I was sitting in the chair waiting for them to bring the boy up, and I figured they'd have him all beat up and be dragging him up from what I saw on television. And when I was sitting there, I was shaking, and the chair was banging against the wall, and the police officer looked over at me, and he said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Yes, I'm fine." And I said, "Oh, they're going to think I'm on drugs too because I'm shaking so bad." So I quickly prayed, and I said, "Dear God, help me because I'm really afraid, and I don't know what to do." And I sat in the chair very still and very calm, and they brought my son up. And I got up and I started to talk to the police officer, and I could hear myself, and I said, "My God, that's not me. I'm not capable of talking like that." Then he said to me, he said, "Do you have any other children?" I said, "Yes, I have a girl." He said, "Well, you go home and look after that girl because this boy's no good." And I said, "Dear God, someone has to help this boy." I said, "You know, this boy is sick." And I said, "It'll take a while." And the police officer looked at me and he says, "You're right, lady." He says, "We see so much of this that we forget." He said, "What he needs is 28 days in St. Thomas." And with that, I left. And that boy got those 28 days in St. Thomas, and he's slowly coming along. So I believe in prayer because it works for me so often when I'm so afraid, and I just quickly say a prayer. I can feel the peace and calmness come over me, and I know what to do. I don't have to still be afraid. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, friends. My name's Alcoholic. My problem's John. I know I got that straight. There are about 12 members of my group. I'm a member of the Big Book Workshop in London, and there are about 12 members of my group here this weekend. I'd like to take this opportunity just to thank the committee and thank the Paul Revere group for putting on this meeting. It's been another awakening for me. I was first exposed to the Paul Revere group down in Montreal when I heard Charlie and Joe down in the Salon ABC in the Sheraton Hotel. And when I heard Charlie at the front of the room talking about the way he put it, my book says, and I thought I was a student of the Big Book at the time, and I thought he was reading from a different book. I had one thing going for me when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. I was teachable. I thank God that you teachers are here. I thank God that these are my classrooms. I thank God for the textbooks you've given me. Just to lighten things up a little bit, something I mentioned to Jack this morning, and it was triggered by something Charlie said last night. I'm also a very fortunate alcoholic to have the program at Al-Anon active and well in our home. And Charlie lovingly said last night that he had some black belt Al-Anon in his home. I asked Jack this morning if he had shotgun Al-Anon in his home. Recovery, both sides. It's a beautiful walk. I want to thank you both again. And there's another thing that I know I have straight that Charlie mentioned. I've been very interested to hear this weekend about the medical aspect of my disease. I tend to complicate the 11th step. I used to ask why and why me. I don't anymore. I use my third step prayer. All the members of my group, they're probably tired of hearing me talk about the third step. It's full cycle with me. I've tried all the prayers, and I find my 11th step is all wrapped up in my third step prayer on page 63 of the Big Book. But I was very interested in the medical aspect and the enzymes and all that stuff, and I think this statement is true for me today, and I know I've got this right, that my liver does not produce enough enzymes to metabolize my resentments. Thank you.
Yes.
Morning, everybody. My name is Dale Hobden, and I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Dale.
You know, when I came around, I'm nervous as hell. I had always believed in a God. Too many things have gone on in my life for me not to believe in a God. I just never realized what His will for me was. And as Tom was speaking, I was thinking of, like how I get up in the morning, and I find that, I still to this day don't know what His will for me is, and I just get up in the morning and I ask and I pray for His guidance, because for so many years I've tried to run my own life, and for so many years it just got me in a lot of crap. And I was trying to go over some things that have happened, and that's an example of what God's will for me is, or has been over the last 3 or 4 months. Was my father died in May of cancer, and I guess I took that with a grain of salt. I guess God's will for him is up there, and He served His purpose while He was here. And a woman who I hated for so many years, my mother, I don't hate her today, and she's going through hell. She lived with that man for 38 years, and she's going through hell. And I think my will, or God's will for me today, is to give my mother as much support as I can. And that's what I've been doing. I've been over there pretty well every day, and I just try to do whatever God wants me to do for her. Whether it's to hold her while she cries, or just sit and listen to her, or whatever. But that's something that I've learned through this program. Thanks.
Thank you, Joe. I believe it was God's will that you be here. Okay, go ahead, Gail. All right.
I'm Gail, and I'm an elf.
After hearing Sue this morning,
I should share a little something that happened to me in just the last couple months. I went into a what they call an assessment course to find out what you could do and couldn't do in the work field. At the end of that time, I was classified as unemployable. For over a month and a half, I went into a deep depression, having the poor me's and feeling totally useless. I talked with my sponsor for a while one day, and her answer to me was, ask God what it is that He wants you to do. You know in your heart, Gail, that there is a use. He has a use for you, or you wouldn't be sober today. I'd done as she asked, and just a week ago I was given the answer. It isn't a big job or what people might call a job, but to me it is going to be a job which I start tomorrow, and that's being a companion to a lady who has had some surgery and can't get around too well, and her husband can't afford to have a nurse in all the time, so I've been elected to be her companion. And to me it's a great honor, because this lady doesn't have many friends and has chosen me to be the one to be with her. And I thank God for that, because I know it's His answer to me. It's not my will. Thank you.
Thank you, Gail. All right, right here and then here. Okay. All right.
Good morning, everyone. I'm an alcoholic, and my name is Mary Ann.
Hi, Mary.
And I, too, am nervous. But I would like to share with you the power of prayer. In early June of 1977, I was a practicing alcoholic. I was miserable. I was sick. I was fed up with my marriage. I was fed up with everything. And I didn't really know or want to accept that alcohol was the problem. So I kept on drinking and kept on being miserable. In a drunk, on the 30th of June, 77, I stumbled into the Alliston group of Alcoholics Anonymous. And that was the beginning of a new way of life for me. Sometime afterwards, when I felt confident enough to tell my family, tell my younger sister, I only have one sister and she's 11 years younger, that I was in this fellowship and trying hard, she said to me in utter amazement, "Not really." Now, I'll try to keep this brief, but it's a bit complicated. The first weekend in June, she was entertaining a group of ladies at her cottage, one of whom was Mary Zed from Kitchener. Now, if there's anyone from Kitchener here, I'm sure they know Mary Zed. And Mary Zed at that time had been very active and still is in this fellowship. And after the festivities of the evening, Barbara, my sister, took Mary aside and said, "I don't know what to do about my sister. She's just drinking so much and I don't like her," and blah, blah, blah. So Mary said, "Well, I could speak to her, Barbara, but I don't think that would do much good because we alcoholics are pretty puffed up with our own egos. So let us pray for her." So apparently they did and continued to do so. Now the purpose of this, my telling this, my sharing this, is that we don't know who is praying for us, what miracles can come from other people's prayers for us. I have been at various times in my 12-stepping very discouraged that I'm not getting anywhere with some gal or guy. And I forget sometimes to pray for that person because I'm too busy with other things. But the power of prayer is there. And if we can remember to use it, we don't know who's trying to help us through their prayer. Thank you for allowing me to share this. And thank you.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Min, and I'm an alcoholic. I am very grateful to be here today. I got up here to thank the committee for coming here to put on a seminar for us. I went through a very rough time in 1978. I was going through a terrible depression. I couldn't accept my little girls drinking and whatnot. I admitted myself to a recovery center, a 28-day program. I had not picked up a drink, but I was going through a terrible, terrible dry drunk, whatever you want to call it. And this weekend, I can honestly say, I know the recovery program, the 28-day program, helped me a lot. But I can honestly say that what I got out of the seminar this weekend, I'll never forget. I'm so grateful that my daughter asked me to come here. This is the icing on the cake. Thank you very much for being here. I just feel like I've been in school and I've learned all about this program. And now I'll be able to tell my sponsees how to work this program. It's very beautiful. Thank you very much for being here.
We know part of what your daughter's will was anyway, don't we, to get you here. We're glad you're here. Yeah.
My name's Jim. I know I was around the program for a while, and I kind of thought that I was much like Bill Wilson. I should have that flashing experience. That kind of kept me from getting this program for a long time. We talk about prayer, and I've come to realize today that I make a lot of mistakes in trying to help other people. I made a lot of mistakes in trying to help myself because self always got in the way. You know, we're asked to practice these principles in all our affairs. And I think when we practice prayer, we get a little better at them as we practice them. And you know, the day comes when we know what God's will is for us. We don't just turn around and think, well, oh yeah, that's God's will for me because I want it to be. I want to help this guy. You know, maybe learning how to pray and attempting to practice this on a daily basis will allow me to find what is in the big book. You know, I still not at that point where I could be. I have a lot of room to grow. This is a lifetime program, and if I continue to do what I've done today, I may learn. You know, I can't stop learning just because I think that I have some knowledge of God's will. I have to improve on that. Thank you.
Thank you.